I'm sure you've all heard that quote that says, "Oh, would some power the gift give us to see ourselves as others see us?" Have you all heard that quote? I could think of a number of texts I could use to build a sermon around that quote. But I want to change the quote this morning a little bit. And I've heard, if you think of the quote saying this, would the power, the gift give us to see ourselves as Jesus sees us. That could be a pleasant experience, and it could be a very challenging experience to see ourselves as Jesus sees us. I'd like for us to begin our thoughts this morning by going back to that very first communion service, the one that Jesus established. So let your mind encompass the scene. Jesus and the disciples have gathered in this upper room to celebrate the Passover supper, really. The disciples had no idea what Jesus was about to do, about giving us the Lord's Supper, creating a whole new service, whole new ceremony. Anyway, they were in that upper room to eat the Passover supper. Everything was prepared. Even water and towels to wash feet with. Now, normally, at a service like this, they would have a servant there to wash the feet of the guest. But somehow, Peter and John forgot that. And so the disciples and Jesus are in that upper room, and there's a sort of a feeling of uncertainty, an attitude of confusion. Every one of those disciples looked over and they could see that water, they could see the towels, and they knew what they were for. But bless your heart, every one of them thought the same thing. I'm not about to wash their feet. Peter could look at John and say, well, I like John. He and I have been spending a lot of time together, but I'm not going to wash his feet. And of course, Jesus could look into their hearts. Gentlemen back there in the booth, I'm going to throw you a curve. I'd like to have Luke 22:24 first. Luke tells us a problem that Jesus could read in the disciples. There was also a dispute among them as to which of them should be considered the greatest. Each one of them wanted to be the boss. I want to be the leader. Well, if you're going to be the leader, you're sure not going to kneel down and wash somebody's feet. You're not going to take the role of a servant. Not if you want to be the leader. And so the disciples are sort of middling around there, wondering what was going to happen, because none of them were willing to go over and get that towel and a bucket of water and start washing their brother's feet. They were all too proud. They were all too self-centered. They wanted the top slot. And they were not about to take the form of a servant and wash their brother's feet. Now then, gentlemen, John 13, verse 5. Absolutely amazing. Jesus, the Son of God, the divine creator, knelt down and washed Peter's feet and John's feet, all the disciples. The man they looked upon as being the Messiah. They believed Jesus was the divine Son of God. It was more than their little brains could comprehend that he would kneel down and wash their feet. Jesus apparently didn't like what he saw in the disciples. Jesus didn't like to see that pride, that self-centeredness, that selfishness, that desire to be in charge, desire to be boss. He didn't like that. So before they actually celebrated the Passover supper, Jesus showed them what a true leader will do. He demonstrated what he had told them over and over again, that I am not here to be served, I came to serve you. If you want to be great, become the least. And so Jesus rebuked their self-centeredness, their selfish desires to be first, thinking they were too good to wash their brother's feet, by Jesus kneeling down and washing their feet. It's really sad to think that the disciples had been with Jesus for 3.5 years, observing him, reading his character, seeing what kind of a person he was, and yet somehow after 3.5 years, they missed it. Completely missed it. They were still acting more like Lucifer. They were still acting more like Satan. Because you remember Satan said, I want to be like the Most High. I want to be charge. I want to be the boss. That's the way they were all feeling. So they were not acting like Jesus. They were acting like Satan. You know what? The Bible doesn't tell us whether the foot washing service of Jesus washing their feet, did it accomplish anything? The Bible doesn't tell us. However, we do read 50 days after the cross. So 51 days, 50 days from this moment on Friday night, Thursday night, Jesus crucified on Friday. So it was 51 days. From this time on, we read in Acts chapter 2 and verse 2, that when the day of Pentecost had fully come, they were all with one accord in one place. So 50 days after the cross, the disciples apparently had made some big changes. They were all with one accord. Did the foot washing service have any part to play in that? We don't know. I suspect it did after Jesus died and resurrected. During that 40 days when Jesus was with the disciples, teaching them and instructing them from a whole new perspective, maybe that's when the community service registered in their minds and they caught the meaning of it. At least, apparently, the foot washing service didn't change Peter. Not at the moment. For if we continue reading in John chapter 13, Let's look at John 13, verses 37, 38. Now, this is the same night. It's just after they've had the foot washing service, they've had the Passover supper, and Jesus has established the Lord's Supper. This happens. Peter said to him, Lord, why can I not follow you now? I will lay down my life for your sake. Jesus answered him, will you lay down your life for my sake? Most assuredly I say unto you, the rooster shall not crow till you have denied me 3 times. So Peter was still the same old self. Having Jesus wash his feet didn't change him. He was still proud, self-centered, satisfied with his own experience. He knew himself. The rest of them may. I wouldn't doubt that, Lord. John, Andrew, Matthew, I don't doubt that they might forsake you, but I'm not going to. They even argued with Jesus. Not me. You see, Peter was still that same old proud, self-centered person. So the foot washing didn't change him, not at the time. And again, we can see that Jesus, reading into his life, looking at Peter, could see things in Peter that Peter couldn't see at all. Peter was blind to his own condition. And even when Jesus tried to illuminate his mind and show him, he wouldn't accept it. He rejected it. I just don't believe you. Basically, is what he's saying. You misunderstand me, Lord. I'm going to hang in there. There's another experience where a man couldn't see in himself what Jesus saw. A young man, in fact, we refer to him usually as a rich young ruler. Anyway, he was a young man, and he was rich. I don't know if he was a ruler or not, but at least he had money. But he felt something missing. He felt like something was not right in his life. He was keeping all the commandments. He was doing everything he knew. He had a checklist, and he could mark them all off. I'm doing this, I'm doing that, I'm doing this. He had it all checked off. But still, there was an emptiness. There was a void, something missing. And one day, he saw Jesus blessing the little children. And on a spur of the moment decision, without thinking, he ran up to Jesus, knelt down in front of him, and said, Rabbi, tell me what I need to do to have the assurance of salvation. What do I need to do to have peace? Now I want you to look at Mark 10, verses 21 and 22. Then Jesus, looking at him, next 2 words, loved him. Jesus is the Son of God. He looked at this young man and he loved him. I don't know what that young man was. I'd like to, someday I want to find out more about that young man. But there must have been something special about him. I do not know of another text where it says that Jesus loved somebody. Specifically, a person. But here's a text where it actually says Jesus loved this man. And Jesus could see in his character. Jesus instantly could see what was missing. he could see what was wrong. Now, let's be honest. This young man was honest. He really didn't know what was wrong. He just felt something missing. Now, it seems harsh to us to read what Jesus said to that young man. But Jesus was honestly dealing with that young man's problem. One thing you like. Hey, one thing. Wow. I'd be happy if Jesus could say that to me. One thing. Jesus provided a whole bunch of things wrong with me. One thing you like. Go your way, sell what you have, give to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. And come and take up the cross and follow me. You see, this young man had a love problem. I think he loved God. I really do. I think he really did love God, and he really wanted to be saved. But boy, he loved that money too. He was rich. And the Bible says he was sad at this word and went away sorrowful, for he had great possessions. His desire to be rich was stronger than his desire to be saved. Now, he had advantage over a lot of us. He already was rich, and he wanted to hang on to it, and probably wanted more. Most of us don't have it, but we'd like to have it. Let me ask you a question. If Jesus were to say to you today, if you want me to, I'll give you today everything you're going to need for the rest of your life. You can hold it in your hands. You can put it in the bank. Would you like me to do that for you? I'll give you everything you're going to need for the rest of your life right now, and you can put it in the bank. Or would you rather Jesus say, look, I love you, I'll take care of you, trust me. I'll take care of you as time goes by. Which one would you choose? There is a desire to have things. I mean, we all are creatures of this world. We'd like to have more of this world. How many wouldn't like to have a better car, or a nicer home, or nicer furniture, or a good insurance policy so that your health would be cared for the rest of your life and you would never have to worry about a medical bill? Well, the Seventh-day Adventist Church has a problem today. Not just the Seventh-day Adventist Church, but every denomination has a problem today. Young men want to be rich. And they go to college and they think about, what am I going to be? How about being a preacher? A pastor? Well, that sounds good. All they do is stand around and talk. That sounds like a pretty good job. Except they don't get paid very much. And then they look at being a computer scientist or electrical engineer. Dare I say it? A politician. And they get paid big money, big bucks. So today, young men are not studying for the ministry. They're going into the higher paid professions. You know who is studying for the ministry today? Young ladies. Because young ladies don't normally get the same pay scale that men do in the job market. Women still are not being paid on the same level that men are being paid. I didn't realize this, but that's true even in the Hollywood. Female stars don't get paid what male stars do. I didn't know that. Read that the other day. So when ladies look at a profession, they look at being a secretary, being a clerk somewhere. They look at the jobs available to them, and they say, well, the ministry pays pretty good and gives a good future, security. You're probably not going to be fired from being a preacher if you keep your nose clean. So young women are studying for the ministry, even though some of us have some qualms about that. Anyway, there is built in to all of us a desire to have more and more of the material things of this life. So that young ruler wasn't different from most of us. I remember a man years ago that was studying to be a doctor. He told me, he said, I really don't want to be a doctor. I really like to be an engineer. I like to build things. I like to build big things, big projects. I'd like to become a real big name builder. That's what I really would love to do. But he says, I know this, that if I was on a job and I had a $1,000 a day penalty if I didn't complete the job on time, I'd get that job done on time if I had to work on Sabbath. I know it would. But if I'm a doctor, I can work on Sabbath, nobody says anything about it. Maybe they should. Anyway, Jesus looked into this young man and could see in him what the young man could not see. And when it was revealed to him, it was too much. It wasn't worth it. And through the years, I've had a lot of people turn away from the gospel for that very same reason. We've got a church member right now who hasn't been in church in 2 or 3 years. Money is more important to him than the gospel, salvation. In the book of Revelation, chapter 3, Jesus tells us this unwillingness to see ourselves as Jesus sees us is paramount. It's true of most all of us to some extent. In fact, Jesus says the last day Christian church in the world is so full of pride and self-satisfaction that I feel like spewing them out of my mouth, vomiting them out. As I look at me, as you look at you, we tend to see ourselves like we want to see ourselves, like we hope we are. It's very difficult for us to see ourselves as we really are. or as Jesus sees us. Just look at this quote. Revelation 3:17. Jesus is speaking to the last day church. Revelation 13, to the Laodicean church, the last church. Because you say, I am rich, have become wealthy, and have needed nothing. I listen to music in the car when I get in, my stereo comes on and I listen to religious music. And there's one song that I've been worrying about lately. It's a song that says, "It is well with my soul." You remember this? You know the song, don't you? It is well with my soul. And I've been worrying about that song because I've been studying Revelation 3:17. And it's sort of scary to think that I am satisfied with myself, rich, have become wealthy. I'm doing everything. I got my checklist. I've checked everything off. Like I say, it's well with my soul. But Jesus says, and do not know. You do not know that you're wretched, miserable, poor, blind, and naked. I was attending an evangelism council many years ago. All the big name evangelists in the Seventh-day Adventist Church were at this meeting in Camp Berkshire, New York. And I was there. Different evangelists get up and talk about their experience and things they were doing. Every one of them was proud of what they're doing. They were boasting about how good they were, how many baptisms they had. Full of self, full of pride, self-centeredness. I didn't hear anybody that talked like they were humble. I don't know. We have a problem, don't we? We really, really do have a problem of seeing ourselves as Jesus sees us. I've been praying that God would reveal me to myself, and it's sort of scary, but I've been praying it. I would encourage you to do the same thing. Ask God to show you yourself. What am I really like? What am I missing? I want to close the sermon by taking you to a man, a rich man, who did respond to Jesus and did believe that Jesus could see in him what he could not see in himself. Are you ready? See if I can find the text. We're going to Matthew 9, verse 9. Matthew was a tax collector. As far as the Jews were concerned, a tax collector was the lowest of the low. I mean, you couldn't get any worse. They were collecting taxes for their oppressors. They were working for the Roman government, collecting taxes. And as far as the Jewish leaders and people were concerned, they were the vilest sinners. Now, the publicans know that. They knew that before they started. They knew that before they became publicans. But they loved money. They wanted to be rich. They say, okay, I may be a sinner. I may be a bad sinner, but I'm going to be a rich sinner. Matthew chose that occupation because he was greedy, self-centered, selfish, and wanted things. He wanted material things. He wanted to be rich. The Bible doesn't tell us anything about the background. It just says that Matthew was at his tax booth collecting taxes one day when Jesus walked by and looked at him. And Jesus saw something in Matthew that Matthew had no idea was in him. He must have been the most surprised person around when Jesus looked at him and said, "Hey, I want you. Come and follow me. I want you to become a preacher." Me? A preacher? You got to be kidding, man. You got to be kidding. You're asking me, you don't even have a place to lay your head. I've got a beautiful mansion. You ask me to leave that and follow you? I've got a comfortable bed. You have nothing. When I follow you, I won't have a bed. I'll sleep on the ground. Hey, man, you got to be crazy. Somehow, I don't know. I'm going to ask Matthew someday. How was it that you were able to believe that Jesus saw you could become a preacher, a tax collector, a sinner, despised by everybody? It's a marvelous story. This man, sitting in his tax booth, believed when Jesus said, "I see something special in you. I want you to be a preacher. I want you to be a servant. I want you to love people, be a soul winner." And Matthew got up and followed him. Praise the Lord. We're having a communion service this morning. We have the bread and the wine up here. But before we partake of that bread and the wine, I want you to just sit and think a minute. What does Jesus see in you? If you suspect, or if you know that Jesus sees something in you that's offensive to him, pride, self-centeredness, love of things, more interested in serving yourself than serving God, more interested in receiving a blessing than being a blessing to others. The foot washing service is a place to remedy that. Before we partake of the Lord's Supper, we're going to separate. Men in one place, ladies in another place. We're going to choose partners and wash each other's feet. And this is a miniature baptism. It's a time when sins are washed away. Pride, self-centeredness, all these bad, ugly things that Jesus doesn't like can be washed away. Now, I understand that some of you, because of physical reasons, can't participate in the foot washing service. I'm getting close to that stage myself. I can kneel down. That's no problem. But getting up tends to be a little of a problem. I'm still trying it, still doing it. Sometimes I have to have help getting up. So I can understand that some of you would not want to participate or not be able to participate in the ordinance of foot washing. So you're welcome just to remain here in the sanctuary. They'll be playing some music, and we'll be back in just a few minutes after we wash each other's feet and come back. Now, I would say this, if you've never seen a foot washing service, and you'd just like to observe one, you're welcome to come in and just observe. We're not embarrassed. We'd be glad for you to come and observe it, see what it's like. But we're going to separate now. Men, women separate, all back in the fellowship hall. There's a divider back there. We're going to wash each other's feet. We'll come back in the sanctuary cleansed from sin. Everything will be right with our souls. Okay? Okay, we'll separate now.